You know, when you think about a death row inmate's final meal, your mind probably jumps to some huge, elaborate feast, right? It's this morbidly fascinating tradition, this one last choice in a life that's about to end. But what if that last choice wasn't a feast at all? What if it was just a single, incredibly strange object? Well, this is the story of that choice and the man who made it. I mean, some prisoners really go all out. John Wayne Gacy wanted fried shrimp and a bucket of KFC. Another guy ordered a meal that was, get this, 29,000 calories. These are acts of pure indulgence, of finding one last bit of comfort. And they kind of set the standard for what we expect a last meal to be. But back in 1963, a prisoner named Victor Feguer made a request that was just so different. It stuck around in history because it was so simple and so odd. Not a big meal, not even a snack. He just asked for one single olive, with the pit still inside. And the question that just hangs in the air is, why? To understand the olive, we have to first understand the man. So, let's go back. Let's turn the clock to the summer of 1960, in Dubuque, Iowa. A drifter had just rolled into town, and his arrival was about to kick off a brutal crime and a chain of events that absolutely no one saw coming. So who was Victor Feguer? Well, he wasn't from Iowa. He was a transient, originally from Michigan, and he had a really troubled past. He had a long documented history of mental illness and had even been diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. And, that context is absolutely crucial when you look at the crime he was about to commit. Feguer's plan was disturbingly cold and methodical. He literally just opened the phone book and picked a doctor, Dr. Edward Bartles, at random. Then he made up a story to get the doctor to leave his home, kidnapped him, and drove him across the Mississippi River from Iowa into Illinois. And there, in a field, he shot the 34-year-old doctor in the head. A few days later, Feguer was picked up 1,000 miles away in Alabama, trying to sell the doctor's car. And that short drive, that little trip from Iowa to Illinois, that was the detail that changed everything legally. Because he crossed state lines with a kidnap victim, Feguer had committed a federal crime. That meant his trial wasn't going to be handled by the state of Iowa. Oh no, it was going to be handled by the US government, which put the death penalty squarely on the table. So, as you might expect, Feguer was convicted pretty quickly and sentenced to death. But his case wasn't over yet. It was about to travel all the way from that Iowa courtroom to the most powerful office in the entire world. After his official appeal was shot down, Feguer's last glimmer of hope was a presidential pardon. And here's the twist. Iowa's own governor, Harold Hughes, who was deeply against capital punishment, personally lobbied on Feguer's behalf. But the final call on whether Victor Feguer would live or die came down to one man, President John F. Kennedy. But Kennedy refused to grant clemency. In a recorded conversation, he laid out his reasoning pretty clearly. The sheer brutality and the cold-blooded nature of the murder just convinced him that mercy wasn't an option here. And with that single decision, Feguer's fate was sealed. Okay, so now let's go to his final hours on March 15th, 1963. And let's get back to that single olive. With the execution now a certainty, the meaning behind that strange request was finally about to become clear. And here's where you see this incredible contrast. On one side, you have the awful, brutal reality of the crime, the murder of Dr. Bartles, a young father with 3 kids and another on the way, whose life was just senselessly erased. And then, on the other side, you have Feguer's final wish. He told the guards he wanted the olive so that an olive tree, a timeless symbol of peace, might one day grow from his grave. Feguer spent his last night holding a vigil with a Catholic priest. On the morning he was set to die, guards at the Iowa State Penitentiary gave him a new suit to wear. Then, he was quietly escorted to the gallows. And this is the final, poignant detail of his story. After the execution was over, as officials were preparing his body, they reached into the pocket of his brand new suit, and there it was, the single olive pit. He had carried that symbol of hope with him, right to the very end. But this story doesn't end at the grave. In a strange, ironic twist of history, the execution of Victor Feguer would have this profound, lasting impact on the very practice of capital punishment itself. Just take a look at this. Feguer's execution in 1963 was the last time the US federal government put a prisoner to death for almost 4 decades. It created this unofficial moratorium, a long pause that wasn't broken until the execution of the Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh way in 2001. But the more immediate and maybe even more shocking impact happened just 2 years later, in 1965. right back in the state of Iowa. Now, this is incredible. One of the official witnesses who was required by law to watch Feguer's hanging was a state lawmaker named John Ellie. And what he saw that day disturbed him so deeply that it cemented his opposition to the death penalty. He went back to the legislature and fought for a bill to abolish capital punishment in Iowa entirely. And just 2 years after Feguer's death, that bill passed. The last execution in Iowa literally helped end executions in Iowa. Which really leaves us with one final haunting question. Was Victor Feguer's request for that single olive a true sign of remorse? A desperate plea for peace from a deeply troubled soul? Or was it something else entirely that we'll never understand? In the end, it kind of forces us to ask ourselves, if you had one last choice, would you pick a final message or final meal?